Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we dig into complex global topics and give you that essential knowledge shortcut.
Today, we are heading into what a lot of strategic thinkers are calling the invisible arena of this century.
It's the ultimate battlefield without borders. We're talking about the Indian Ocean.
An ocean that, everyone depends on, but very few people truly understand.
Exactly. And our source material for this deep dive is, well, it's absolutely clear on this. And pretty provocative, actually. It says whoever controls the Indian Ocean region, the IOR, they control the 21st century. That's the core idea we're jumping into.
And look, judging by the sheer scale of naval investment we are seeing from the big players, that's really not an exaggeration.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to pull out the most critical insights on why the Indian Ocean matters so much geopolitically.
Then we'll unpack that central rivalry, the triangle between India, China, and the U.S.
And then we'll get into the really interesting stuff, the surprising new threats, the gray zone maritime warfare that's emerging.
Let's start by framing those stakes, because this whole conversation, it really has to begin with the geography.
Absolutely. What is it about this specific body of water that makes it the new center of global power?
Well, the fascinating thing here is that the Indian Ocean isn't just a huge expanse of water. It is fundamentally the world's trade backbone. Global stability is literally anchored here.
Just give us the numbers.
Okay, so think about this. Over 80% of global oil trade passes through its choke points.
80%.
80%. Nearly 40% of the world's population lives in the countries bordering it. And our essential supply chains, everything from electronics to energy, they all depend on that uninterrupted flow.
That sounds like a massive amount of global economic stability resting on a few very narrow points on a map. So let's talk about those fragile arteries, the choke points we need to watch.
Right. There are three spots that basically define global risk in this region. First, you have the Strait of Hormuz.
The gateway for all that Persian Gulf energy.
Exactly. If that closes, oil prices don't just, creep up. They skyrocket instantly. It would be an immediate global market shock.
A guaranteed crisis trigger, no question.
Precisely. The second one is Bab el-Mandeb. This is that narrow link that connects the Indian Ocean to the Red Sea and then onto the Suez Canal.
And as we've seen recently, it's incredibly vulnerable.
Our sources really highlight that. The recent Houthi attacks have shown just how fragile that link is. You see how low-tech, asymmetric threats can bring massive global shipping to a near standstill.
And that third one, this one is absolutely vital for the big Asian powers, the Strait of Malacca.
Malacca is one of the busiest shipping lanes on the entire planet, but for a country like China, it represents a deep vulnerability.
How so?
Nearly 80% of China's energy imports pass right through that strait. So if you can control or even just influence what happens at Malacca, you have enormous leverage over China's entire economy.
Malacca is the classic choke point, their Achilles heel. But, China's pushing so hard with the Belt and Road Initiative, building out rail and pipelines through Pakistan, through Myanmar. Are the sources suggesting that Beijing is actually sort of insulating itself from that risk? Or is that reliance still absolute?
And that is the core strategic problem for them. Yes, China is absolutely trying to diversify its routes, but the sheer volume of trade we're talking about means that for the foreseeable future, its reliance on the Malacca Strait is still absolute.
So that dependency is what's driving their naval expansion.
It's the strategic force compelling their relentless push into the Indian Ocean, which, brings us right to the players.
Right. With that much concentrated risk, we have to look at who is positioned to either leverage it or, exploit it. Who makes up that central triangular rivalry on the chessboard?
It's really defined by India, the U.S., and China. But you also have a growing number of middle powers that add a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
Let's start with India, the natural guardian.
They know over geography on their side.
They do. And they're really aiming to be the stabilizing force in the Indo-Pacific.
And their big initiative here is the Sagar Doctrine, which stands for security and growth for all in the region. Plus, they're actively expanding their naval presence in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Which is a huge strategic move, positioning them right at the mouth of that critical choke point we just talked about. Malacca. And they're backing this up with diplomacy, building these strong strategic ties with France, Oman, the Seychelles, Mauritius, Australia. It's a diplomatic framework that's designed to be, inclusive and stabilizing.
But the source of all the friction here is China. The relentless expansionist. The speed and scale of their naval growth is It's staggering.
It really is. Our sources point out that China's naval growth in just the last decade exceeds what most other nations have managed to achieve in 50 years.
And that new capacity is tied directly to their strategy, the old string of pearls idea.
Which is now evolving into the full-blown Maritime Silk Road, part of the Belt and Road Initiative. It's all about establishing these dual-use footprints. You've got Djibouti, their first ever overseas military base, Gwadar in Pakistan, Hambantota in Sri Lanka, port developments everywhere.
And, crucially, their new aircraft carriers. The Liaoning, Shandong, and the new Fujian. These aren't just for making a point near Taiwan.
No, not at all. They are explicitly designed for power projection deep into the Indian Ocean. They are signaling that they are ready to break out of any kind of containment strategy that's centered on that Malacca choke point.
Which brings us to player number 3, the United States, the balancer.
Their strategic shift really recognizes the IO's importance. I mean, just look at the fact they renamed the U.S. Pacific Command to Indo-PACOM.
Indo-Pacific Command. And they have that vital foothold at Diego Garcia, which is cited as one of the most important American bases anywhere in the world. Their whole strategy seems to center on balancing China's rise through cooperation.
Exactly. Establishing these crucial military logistics agreements with key allies like India, Japan, Australia.
The Quad.
The Quad. And you can't forget those other key middle powers. France is a permanent player because of its territories, like Reunion. And Australia and Japan are, as you said, critical through the Quad cooperation. So it's a very multi-layered, very heavily contested theater.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. We've talked about the battleships, the bases, the traditional stuff. But the sources are emphasizing that the next big conflicts in the Indian Ocean might not involve firing a single shot, at least not in the way we think.
That is the key shift.
We're talking about new age threats and gray zone maritime warfare.
That's it. The conflict is moving away from these huge kinetic clashes and into the digital, the unmanned, the hybrid space. This is, like you said, a conflict fought without firing a single cannonball.
Let's break them down, starting with something we've already seen in action. Drone swarms.
Absolutely. The sources point directly to the low-cost autonomous systems that groups like the Houthis have used, or what we've seen in the Black Sea. These unmanned boats and aerial drones can disrupt blockades, or, more importantly, they can overwhelm very sophisticated, very high-value naval ships.
So you're talking about potentially taking down a multi-billion-dollar destroyer with what are essentially autonomous, explosive, remote-controlled boats.
It completely changes the cost-benefit analysis of deterrence. It really does. And then beneath the surface, you've got the threat of underwater drones.
Stealthy, silent.
And extremely dangerous. They are perfect for laying mines, for surveillance, for attacking submarines. They introduce this level of silent uncertainty that conventional navies really struggle to counter.
And then there's the digital side. AI-driven maritime surveillance.
Right. Satellite and AI systems can now track pretty much every single vessel in real time. Every ship becomes a data point. It completely eliminates the anonymity that ships used to have at sea and creates all these new vulnerabilities for targeting and intelligence gathering. There are no hiding spots left.
And maybe the most immediate disruptive threat cyber warfare aimed at ports.
Ports aren't just concrete and cranes anymore. They're these highly interconnected digital networks. A relatively small cyber attack can grind billions of dollars of trade to a halt almost instantly.
It's an easy, non-kinetic way to cripple a global supply chain without ever leaving your own coast.
Exactly. And finally, you have the more subtle stuff, psychological and information warfare.
What does that look like at sea?
It's things like broadcasting fake distress messages, creating false shipping alerts, pushing specific narratives to shape diplomacy or turn coastal nations against a rival power, all without launching a single missile. It's about manipulating the operational and the political environment at the same time.
So what does all this mean for the immediate future? If NDO wants to secure its position as that natural guardian in this high-risk gray zone theater, what's the strategic roadmap it needs to follow?
Well, India has some really critical strategic debates it has to resolve, and they're mostly centered on capability. The classic one is the carrier versus submarine debate.
Right. Carriers give you that visible power projection, but submarines give you stealth and deterrence. Where do the sources land on this?
The sources basically argue India can't choose one over the other, but they do say the ultimate mark of a great maritime power is its underwater endurance and its independent deterrent. So they need a balanced approach.
So what does balanced look like?
It means 2 to 3 dedicated carrier strike groups and a much, much stronger underwater fleet. This means rapidly adding more SSNS nuclear attack submarines, which have, unlimited range and speed.
A completely different capability than conventional diesel subs. So while the carriers get all the headlines, the real game-changing investment is happening underwater, securing that strategic deterrence.
That's it. And they also need more AIP, subs air-independent propulsion, which are incredibly silent and stealthy for operating in those shallower coastal waters. That whole transition is it's non-negotiable for future naval dominance.
Okay, so that's the hardware. But what about geography? What's India's single biggest strategic asset?
The Andaman and Nicobar Command? Without a doubt, this is India's natural gatekeeper of the Malacca Strait.
So what do they need to do with it?
To really leverage it, India has to accelerate fighter deployments there, expand its naval aviation capabilities, and build much deeper, more operational alliances with the ASEAN navies to secure that whole approach.
Which brings us to this really critical contradiction. India's greatest strength, arguably, is its reputation for trust. It's seen as a benign, stabilizing force. But the roadmap you just laid out requires massive hard power projection, SSNs, carriers, fighters. How do you square that circle? Because, trust alone won't hold back a nuclear fleet.
And that is the central paradox, isn't it? On one hand, India must aggressively leverage its reputation to build these long-term, stable partnerships with coastal nations that are wary of other powers.
And on the other hand,
they have to rapidly accelerate logistics agreements around the world so their navy can refuel and restock far from home. And they must accelerate their own indigenous naval tech things like the INS Vikrant carrier to reduce that dangerous import dependency and just build capability at scale.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. It's so clear that the Indian Ocean is way more than just a transit zone. It's the defining theater of 21st century power, where geopolitics is crashing into technological disruption.
It really is the gateway to India's future. The sources all suggest the next decade is going to define whether India successfully becomes a true maritime superpower, or if it just sits and watches others shape the region from its own doorstep.
And that outcome hinges on strategic investment in power projection, partnerships, and technology.
That's the whole game.
And that leaves us with this final provocative thought for you to think about. Can India truly become the central power of the Indo-Pacific, dominating its waters and securing its interests, while at the same time maintaining its crucial narrative as a responsible, benign great power? That balancing act between soft diplomacy and hard deterrence, that might be the biggest challenge of all. Stay informed, stay strategic. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.